on the BDTV Breakfast Show. My name is Elizabeth Musa, and today we're focusing on Nigeria's perceived corruption index. For years, Nigeria has won the label World's Capital for fraud, and its global reputation stained by persistent headlines, viral email scams, and a corruption index that many accept without scrutiny. But what if I told you that the narrative is far from the full picture, maybe even the opposite of the truth? Behind the noise lies data, hard numbers, suggesting that what the world believes about Nigeria may be more stereotype than substance. Consider this: 71% of the so-called Nigerian prince scams originate not from Nigeria, but from the United States. Nigeria ranks 6th and not first in global cybercrime. Nigerian fintech companies, they boast lower fraud rates than their US counterparts, and the world is now licensing Nigerian anti-fraud technology. So the real question today is this: is the world's view of Nigeria's corruption grounded in evidence or built on an outdated perception that's costing billions in lost opportunity? Well, to answer this and so much more is Uchechukwu Ajuziogu, is a US-based Nigerian enterprise tech leader who's been vocal about reframing the narrative backed by data and not dogma. Welcome to the show, Uchechukwu.
Very much. It's very awesome to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here this morning. Let's begin with the nitty-gritty. What would you say is really behind Nigeria's global image of being linked to fraud and corruption, even when the data says otherwise?
I would say it's been of actual bias. There has been to actually show that this is not who we are. We are not in the list of the ranking for countries globally, but it has been overlooked because it don't fit certain type of stereotype. And over the years, it has become a very standard practice for people globally to actually refer to Nigerians as actually scam. So this specific data has been there. It just took time and going into the rabbit hole for people like me to actually dig it out and actually find it out. So it's really all about bias and also supporting negative stereotypes. So now that we have this this specific data there now, it's going to change the whole negative narrative a bit.
Right. I looked through a little bit of your research and leadership experience, and it paints a very different picture. Walk us through, some of the biggest myths versus facts, like the fraud rates or the origin of these online scams that we see.
Well, the thing there has been, always be scams, right? It has been really happening, right? Now we have been to hear about Nigerian fraud, but we don't know much about advance fee fraud, which is prevalent in most of the advanced countries, right? So the start of this fraud thing has been from a very kind of cynical point of view, where we've had people from different countries who do so many different types of fraud. And one of the most notorious forms of that fraud is advanced fee fraud. This is a fraud where, they use pitch emails to reach out to most of the companies and, claim to be what they are actually not. And this fraud is prevalent across most of the advanced countries: US, Romania, Russia, China, right? It's whole lot of them that are this thing. And at the end of the day, it's now because of Nigeria being in the mix. It's now referred to the fact that most countries and most of the reports now decide to point Nigeria in this kind of negative light. But then when you look at very serious, data points from a group that is called UCLA, they did a research report as to why does it look like Nigeria is being featured a lot in form of this fraud when it's not really true. We discovered that most of the times when these media try to report stories regarding fraud and things like that, tend to put Nigeria in the topic, because if they don't put Nigeria in the mix, they don't get clicks, they don't get view.
Mm.
So we now discover that it's anytime they put Nigeria in this mix, they get 340% increase in their views. So you can realize that perspective of this fraud thing not coming from Nigeria, is coming from US, Canada, Russia, so many of these advanced countries to fit the stereotype, to support the negative narrative. Nigeria comes in mix and they keep on using it as a kind of a recursive frame to put it out there. And this part of what is the issue that we're actually facing.
All right, so if I hear you correctly, there's a part of Nigeria being a good conversation starter, if you ask me, just being that fixing Nigeria
Exactly.
in somewhere, you just get
True.
people to be pay more attention, right? Right. And let's talk about the striking irony that we have here, because we've been often accused of cybercrime, but now we're seeing that we're producing some of the
True.
world's best anti-fraud technology. Now, what would you say is the reason for that innovation, and why is the world now turning to Nigerian built solutions? Because I saw that also in your article.
Yeah. The thing, Nigeria has been forced to actually, when you're being labeled a fraudulent country, when you don't do such in a very big, you tend to take the heat for most of the negative things. So over the years, we've actually been an increase in most of the foreign companies who have actually restricted Nigerians from actually using most of their payment platform, such as PayPal, Wise, so many of them. Nigerians can't use things. And this led to Nigerians, smart innovators we have, coming up to be incredible systems that work, which we're using to access international payments and, creativity. And this is a thing because when you try to raise funding as an American or a white person, you don't really need to go through.
Uchechukwu, I'm sorry, we can't hear you anymore, so you might need to turn on your audio. We've lost your audio right now, but just before we lost your audio, you were speaking about the fact that obviously there's always some success born out of ingenuity, and perhaps that was the case for Nigeria, because having been accused of cybercrime for the longest time, now we're producing some of the world's best anti-fraud technology, and we're seeing some of the best fintech platforms. If you ask me, you talk about the likes of Andela, we talk about Flutterwave. There are a number of them, and they're making Nigeria proud on a global scale, and really there's innovation there. Uchechukwu, do we have you now? So this is also one challenge that we still have in Nigeria, the challenge of, technology. We're still, even while we're almost there, but we still have the struggle here and there from, um, wonky internet and some of those challenges that we keep facing. But we'll go on a quick break and we'll be right back. Welcome back. This is still the big story on the BDTV Breakfast Show. And just before we went on the break, we were talking all about Nigeria's corruption index. We're talking about the fact whether it's a reality, or if if it's a perception or wrong perception. And I was speaking with Uche Chukwu, who is well versed in this in this area. Talking about technology, fraud, corruption, and the likes. And we were talking all about Nigerian solutions and how Nigeria has now become one of the world's leading, solution provider when it comes to anti-fraud technology. And Uchechukwu was speaking to us. So Uchechukwu, you were talking on, speaking to the fact that Nigeria has probably gone through the challenging time and is now maybe leveraging its ingenuity. Talk to me about that. If you could just unmute your mic, because we can't hear you.
All right.
All right, please go ahead.
Nigeria. All right. So, like I was saying, over the years, we had to face issues where we couldn't use international platforms, right? We just couldn't use platforms like PayPal, and etc. So over the years, really affected how we Nigerians could earn, how we could access, global, or global needs. And over this whole course of time, we've seen, it's stepping to build innovative financial products. And this did not come because of we really needed it. It came because it was a necessity, because Nigerians, and we couldn't raise funding just because we could just send pitch decks. So let me kind of set the whole narrative here. When a white man, when a Western person wants to raise funding for particular, fintech, they don't need to go through the rigorous scrutiny that we go through. So they could just come up and present themselves with, let's say, kind of a PowerPoint presentation, and they'll get funding, right? But for Nigerians, because of the stigma, because of the negative narratives behind us, we've had to go through the point where we had to do a whole lot of compliance, meeting certain, key needs before we could even meetings with foreign investors. So you can see that it was nothing. We couldn't just walk away in and start raising funding. So this whole thing led to building innovative products, innovative cybersecurity products that are being used not just by Nigeria today, but globally. And we've been able to see a whole lot of Nigerian fintech companies who have been able to make great scale, do a whole lot of great things because of this. So it's more like an ingenuity, not like something that had to be done because there was no option for that. We didn't have the same advantage our other counterparts had.
Things that stood out for me in your research was the statistic you pointed us out to us. You mentioned that 2.1 billion dollar is being lost in Nigeria annually, and this is due to false perception. So talk to me about the human cost here. How have the stereotypes translated into discrimination in visas, job hiring, and investment?
We've lost a lot of opportunities for those of the young folks who are trying to do global gigs, freelancers. It's difficult to receive payments using international platforms. It's more difficult to get visas, right? Even if you're a global researcher who has done a whole lot of, great things, just having the green passport is enough to get you rejected for no reason, right? So there are a whole lot of, things that has been against us because of this false narrative, getting jobs, getting visas, traveling for different conferences, things like that is really, really affecting a lot of the young population because they can't really expand because of these particular dynamics. And this is one of the reasons why, if you look at when you go to my work, you now realize that we had the case of a certain Okafor who was, let from her job because of her Nigerian threats. So these are things that really affect us, and it's not really a very good thing. If it continues this way, if we don't change the certain narrative, we will end up with having a large population who are young, but they won't be able to get access to, global gigs, global freelancing deals, access to actually travel and all those things, because the whole world frowns upon Nigerians just because of a false narrative. And that's why this particular research is very, very necessary to clear that particular bias.
You've spoken about this false narrative, but I mean, right now, from Microsoft to Stripe, we're seeing some global players admit that they perhaps underestimated Nigerian talent. Are we witnessing a turning point of some sort, or is this still performative at the top?
At, well, at this point, it could be both. But at the same time, we are seeing great strides. We are seeing people who, even since this work was launched, we've gotten people who have top people who are working in top companies globally, government agencies who have actually started to say, this is a good, very good narrative. We didn't know this was not it. And you realize that most of what people know about Nigerian fraud is what they had, is something that they don't even have the data, they don't even have the core data. And ever since this actually came out, it's been more of people realizing that there is more than it meets the eye. And over this course of time, we are going to be seeing some kind of changes towards the needs of about policies that might be met by those who are the upper level, who might be able to use works like this to come up with effective policies that would help to mitigate the disparity between Nigeria and the rest of the world.
Right, and you did mention the German post-World War II model as an example of reputation rehabilitation. What are some of the practical lessons that Nigeria can take from that in reshaping our global perception through policy and then reform?
Well, it's necessary to have stakeholder discussion, right? We can't go further. Even doing using the German model, there were a whole lot of things done by the other side, but at the end of the day, they had to come together and say, okay, look, this is where we are bad at, this is where we're good at, and this is where we can come together to make certain kind of changes. Over the years, we've been having news reports or negative report on Nigeria, especially from the media, most of the media, and we need to come up with effective policies and discuss with law, the enforcement, those that enforce laws, the police, the EFCC, folks like that. There has to be a combined policy discussion with different stakeholders who are in the basics of this financial ecosystem, right? To come up with policies that would help to mitigate these things. And that is one aspect that the Nigerian people and the Nigerian government can use. And that is part of using part of the German post-war reconciliation tactic. There are many others, but we need to come together as a society, as a group, to come up with effective policy because we don't really have a strong policy on this. Most of the Nigerians believe that they are a country that does fraud in a big way. Meanwhile, they are not, and they've gotten used to accepting it that, oh, I didn't get this because I'm Nigerian. But someone from another country who is doing worse than Nigeria can get a visa and not get denied without any reason. There has to be some policy, some group discussion, some kind of stakeholder level group to talk about how to come plans and policies so that Nigerians would not be given the that backhand by the global, world. We need to do better, and that is by having important discussions policy-wise.
Chechuku Ajuziogu, US-based Nigerian enterprise tech leader. Thank you for joining us on The Big Story this morning.
Thank you very much. I'm very much obliged. Thank you.
Well, this has been The Big Story on the BDTV Breakfast Show. Up next is Social Listening. Do stay with us.